Greetings, philosophers. Welcome to Philosophy Zone, the podcast where we dive into the big ideas that shape our world. Today, we're stepping into the smoky cafes of mid-20th century Paris to explore the life and writings of Jean-Paul Sartre, a philosopher, novelist, and playwright whose ideas about freedom, responsibility, and the human condition still resonate deeply today. Sartre's work is intense, provocative, and sometimes unsettling, but it's also profoundly human. So grab a coffee or maybe a glass of wine and let's get into it. Jean-Paul Sartre was born in Paris in 1905, and from the start, his life was shaped by a kind of intellectual restlessness. Orphaned by his father at a young age, he was raised by his mother and grandfather, a man who loved books and ideas. Sartre was a precocious kid, small, bespectacled, with a wandering eye that made him self-conscious, but his mind was razor-sharp. By his 20s, he was studying philosophy at the prestigious École Normale Supérieure, where he met Simone de Beauvoir, his lifelong partner, intellectual equal, and, frankly, one of the most formidable thinkers of the 20th century. Their relationship was unconventional, open, fiercely independent, and built on a shared passion for ideas. It's impossible to talk about Sartre without mentioning de Beauvoir, not just because of their personal bond, but because their philosophical work was so intertwined. Sartre's big moment came in the 1930s and 40s, during a time when Europe was grappling with war, occupation, and existential dread. This was the perfect backdrop for his philosophy, which we now call existentialism. At its core, existentialism is about the individual confronting the raw, unfiltered reality of existence. Sartre's most famous line, "Existence precedes essence," sums it up. Unlike a chair or a tool, which is designed with a purpose in mind, humans, Sartre argued, are thrown into the world without a predefined meaning or purpose. We exist first, and then it's up to us to create our own essence, our own meaning, through our choices and actions. It's a liberating idea, but it's also terrifying, because it means we're entirely responsible for who we become. No excuses, no blaming fate, or God or society. It's all on us. Let's pause on that for a second, because this is where Sartre grabs you by the shoulders and shakes you. Freedom, for him, isn't just a nice idea. It's an inescapable burden. You're free to choose, always, even when you feel trapped. Say you're stuck in a dead-end job or a toxic relationship. Sartre would say you're choosing to stay there, even if it feels like you have no choice. By not acting, you're still making a choice. Sartre's philosophy forces us to confront the fact that if we feel stuck, we are choosing to stay stuck, and that realization, while uncomfortable, pushes us to make changes. Sartre's most famous philosophical work is Being and Nothingness, published in 1943. It's a dense book, no question. Over 600 pages of intricate arguments about consciousness, freedom, and what it means to be human. But don't let that scare you off. At its heart, it's about how we navigate a world that doesn't come with an instruction manual. Sartre talks about bad faith, a concept that's as relevant today as it was then. Bad faith is when you lie to yourself to avoid the anxiety of freedom. Think of someone who says, "I'm just not good at relationships," or "I'm too old to change careers." They're dodging responsibility for their choices by pretending they're fixed or defined by circumstances. Sartre calls this out as a kind of self-deception. We all do it sometimes, but he urges us to face our freedom head-on and take responsibility for our lives. Now, Sartre wasn't just a philosopher sitting in an ivory tower. He was a storyteller too. His novel Nausea, published in 1938, is a brilliant, unsettling exploration of existential dread. The main character, Antoine Roquentin, is a historian who starts to feel that life itself is absurd, almost sickening. Objects, people, even his own existence start to seem meaningless, like they're just there without purpose. It's heavy stuff, but it's also incredibly relatable. Who hasn't had a moment where the world feels pointless, where you wonder, what's the point of all this? Sartre doesn't give easy answers, but he suggests that meaning comes from what we do, the projects we take on, the values we choose to live by. Sartre also wrote plays, and one of his most famous is No Exit from 1944. It's a claustrophobic, intense drama where three people are trapped in a room in hell, except hell isn't fire and brimstone, it's just them, stuck together forever, unable to escape each other's gaze. The famous line from the play is, "Hell is other people." Now, that's often misunderstood. Sartre isn't saying people are inherently awful. What he means is that we often let others define us. We worry about how we look in their eyes, and that can trap us in bad faith, where we live for their approval instead of our own freedom. Think about social media today. How much of what we post is about crafting an image for others? Sartre would have a field day with that. During World War II, Sartre's ideas took on a new urgency. He was active in the French resistance, writing for underground newspapers while Paris was under Nazi occupation. This wasn't just intellectual posturing. Sartre lived his philosophy. He believed that in extreme situations like war or oppression, the weight of our choices becomes even clearer. You can't just sit on the sidelines and claim neutrality. That's a choice too. His experiences during the war shaped his later work, where he argued that our freedom is always tied to others. We're not isolated individuals. Our choices ripple out and affect the world. This is why Sartre got so involved in politics after the war, championing causes like anti-colonialism and socialism, though his relationship with communism was complicated and often critical. Let's talk about Sartre's politics for a moment, because they're a big part of his legacy. In the 1950s and 60s, he became a public intellectual, writing essays, giving speeches, and even getting arrested during protests against the Algerian War. He saw philosophy as something that should engage with the world, not just sit in books. But his political stances weren't without controversy. He supported revolutionary movements, sometimes uncritically, and his flirtations with Marxism alienated some of his earlier fans. Still, you have to admire his commitment to living his ideas, even when it made him unpopular. He wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. Sartre's relationship with Simone de Beauvoir also deserves a closer look, because it's such a fascinating part of his story. They were partners for over 50 years, but they never married or lived together in a traditional sense. They had an open relationship, which was radical for the time, and they challenged each other intellectually. De Beauvoir's own work, especially The Second Sex, which laid the groundwork for modern feminism, was influenced by Sartre's ideas about freedom, but she took them in her own direction. Together they were a powerhouse, hosting salons in Paris cafes, debating with other intellectuals like Albert Camus, and shaping the cultural landscape of their time. Now, Sartre could be stubborn, even dogmatic, especially in his later years. His health declined in the 1970s, partly due to his relentless work habits and chain smoking. He died in 1980, but his ideas have lived on, influencing everything from literature to psychology to political activism. One of the things to love about Sartre is how he forces you to confront yourself. Reading him isn't always comfortable, but it's exhilarating. He doesn't let you hide. He makes you ask, am I living authentically? Am I taking responsibility for my choices? Or am I just drifting, blaming the world for my problems? Let's bring this back to today, because Sartre's ideas are still so relevant. Think about the pressures we face. Social media, career expectations, the constant noise of modern life. It's easy to fall into bad faith, to let algorithms or societal norms dictate who we are. Sartre would tell us to snap out of it, to recognize our freedom, and to start creating our own meaning. It's not easy, but it's empowering. Maybe you're listening to this and feeling stuck in some part of your life. Sartre's challenge is to own that, to see that you have the power to act, even if it's scary. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one last thought from Sartre's play, The Flies, a retelling of a Greek myth. In it, the character Orestes says, "I am my freedom." That's the heart of Sartre's philosophy. You are your freedom. It's not something you find or earn. It's something you are, every single day, through every choice you make. So, what are you going to do with it? That's all for this episode of Philosophy Zone. If you enjoyed diving into Sartre's world, let us know what you think in the comments and tell us which philosopher you'd like us to explore next. Until then, keep questioning, keep freeing yourself, and we'll see you in the next episode.